My first question is, what is it all about? Why this sudden announcement, which took a lot of people by surprise, of this pullout from Mekele and this ceasefire?
Well, frankly, 10 days ago, the Tigrayans left their mountain and the hills and launched a huge offensive. And they've pushed back the Eritrean, the Ethiopian forces. Then yesterday, the Ethiopians sent planes to take most of the money out of the banks of the regional capital of Tigray, Mekele. And then the government just frankly pulled out because they were about to be overrun.
So the people celebrating in the streets of Mekele, is that premature? Can we expect some kind of response, perhaps even from the air?
That is, of course, always possible. You can't rule that out. But let's not be mistaken. You know, towns all the way up to the border with neighboring Eritrea have been taken by the Tigrayans. And you can see images and video of people celebrating in all the towns. So, you know, there's been a huge pullout. The response from the Ethiopian government has been to declare a unilateral ceasefire. But the problem is there are still a lot of issues to be resolved. There are still troops on what the Tigrayans regard as their soil. And the Amhara, which is another ethnic group which joined the war on the Ethiopian side, have said if you take Western Tigray, it's a no-go. I mean, and that's just not possible. The Tigrayans are certainly going to want their territories back.
Are we witnessing a balkanization of Ethiopia, that it could be headed towards some kind of breakup like there was in the former Yugoslavia in the 90s?
Look, that is a problem that has been on the cards right since the start of this war in November last year. The U.S. Institute of Peace warned about it on the second day of the war, that it could see the largest state collapse in modern history, and that it would be catastrophic for the Horn of Africa if that happened. But it's not impossible. Now, I'm certainly not predicting it, but, you know, it is a real issue. But the biggest problem at the moment is that there are 900,000 people who've been identified by USAID, the American aid arm, as being on the verge of starvation. What we need now is for the ports of neighboring Eritrea to be open so that aid can flood in. The blockades that have been in place in Ethiopia needs to be lifted, and food needs to come in from Sudan. If that happens, then this famine can be avoided. But otherwise, we're going to see a famine similar to the one we saw in 84-85, when there were 400,000 people dead.
What are the chances, particularly of that aid coming in via Sudan?
Well, it's a possibility, because the Tigrayans are certainly determined to link up with Sudan again. When the war began, the first thing that happened was the Eritreans from the north, the Ethiopians from the south, cut the links between Tigray and Sudan. It was a strategic decision by the powers that be in Addis Ababa and Asmara. But the Tigrayans think that it's vital that they reestablish that link. If it is reestablished, of course, it means that they have a way out of Ethiopia that is not reliant on the powers in Addis Ababa. So, you know, that is why it's such a crucial issue. But it means taking back lands that the Amhara think are theirs. So you can see how complicated this is. The thing that needs to happen now is that people sit down and talk to each other. The Ethiopian government has tried a unilateral ceasefire. You can't do it that way. They need to lift the designation that the Tigrayans are terrorists and sit down and talk to them. That is the way forward.
And who to broker those talks?
Oh, there are plenty of people that are happy to broker it. The Americans would certainly do it. The African Union established mediators. When the war began, Cyril Ramaphosa, the president of South Africa, sat down with the president of Ethiopia, and they agreed 3 mediators, including Ellen Johnson Sirleaf of Liberia. And then the prime minister of Ethiopia, who really is the power, just said, no, I'm not negotiating with anybody. This is a law and order situation. We will deal with it as such. Well, 8 months later, he's just lost the war.
Martin Plaut, I have to ask you, the start of the offensive on Tigray by government forces coincided with the U.S. elections. Joe Biden inaugurated in January. Since then, the language from the U.S. State Department has been very strong. Just a few hours ago, one senior State Department official warning that Ethiopia and Eritrea should anticipate further action from the United States if this doesn't result in the improvements that you mentioned, that is, getting food aid to people. Why has the language been so strong since Biden came to office?
I think it's pretty simple. The Tigrayan community, the Ethiopian community, and the Eritrean community in the United States have strong voices. They're part of the Black Caucus, and they have been mobilizing very vigorously in the United States to try and lobby their congressmen and women. And of course, that does, come through. Of course, they are also lobbying on the Ethiopian government side and from the Eritrean government in the opposite direction. But at the moment, I would say that the Tigrayans in particular have really done an extraordinary job in mobilizing opinion so that people think that they really have to come behind the Tigrayans in what is a desperate situation. I mean, we really, the idea that there will be hundreds of thousands of people dead, as there were in the 84-85 famine, when 400,000, 500,000 people died in Tigray. That's just unthinkable, and yet it could happen, and that has to be avoided.
And one final question. You mentioned earlier how Ethiopia's prime minister had, quote, lost the war. Where does this leave Abiy Ahmed?
Very vulnerable. I mean, the Ethiopian army is, pretty unhappy about the presence of Eritrean soldiers on their soil. And what they will do when they finally get back to Addis Ababa, I don't know. But, armies that have been defeated really don't like it. And, I'm never going to predict the future. It's just, mad. But, I think that there will be a lot of unhappiness about what is happening now inside the military of Eritrea as well as Ethiopia. And the long-term consequences of that, well, we'll just have to wait and see.
Martin Plaut of the Institute of Commonwealth Studies, thank you for speaking with us from London.
Pleasure.